I'm speechless. It was remarkable. Thank you so much, Lachlan. I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to each and every proud Australian in this room tonight. I would also like to add that I think each and every coalition candidate going into the next federal election should have been here tonight to hear Lachlan's words and also, of course, our other wonderful speakers tonight, Tony Abbott, George Bindley, Gina Reinhardt. So tonight we have heard from some remarkable Australians. Gina, of course, an absolute, a remarkable woman, a pioneer in her own right, who has reminded us to also acknowledge the pioneer women of our country's history. Those women who forged ahead, forged a path alongside our menfolk to ensure the way of life that we have now. And for those of us women that can walk behind them and stand tall. George Bindley, of course, thank you very much for your service to our nation, ensuring that we have the freedoms. We are a lucky nation, the nation that we have today because men like George fought for us to have what we have today. We have heard from one of our nation's most dedicated and principled and loyal former Prime Ministers, Tony Abbott. And of course, Lachlan Murdoch, whose family have provided a beacon of light in a sea of woke darkness via the necessary media platforms that deliver genuine, common sense and fact-driven news reporting for our benefit. So I don't think I need to ask you all to put your hands together to thank everyone for their wonderful contribution, not only tonight, but for what they have done to hold the ground for the benefit of all of us by creating understanding through truth-telling and common sense. Believe it or not, we all have something in common. I have something in common with these two gentlemen down here. What? Some would even gasp. Certainly those of the ideological left. What does an Aboriginal woman from the Northern Territory have in common with a white former Prime Minister who has been described by his detractors in horrible terms like misogynist? Or how could I have anything in common with a media mogul who has been accused by at least one leftist online publication of using his media platforms to exploit white nationalism? What could an Aboriginal woman possibly have in common with such deplorable characters? Well, aside from the fact that we're all simply human beings, right? Yeah. We've all been described in unsavoury terms by the left, as well as deliberately misinterpreted by them in an attempt to undermine us. What our detractors don't realise is we share a deep love for this nation of opportunity. In particular, we hold dear the shared Australian values we have all contributed to since our nation was first settled. And we share a desire to improve our Australian way of life for the benefit of us all. The left, on the other hand, seek to keep our nation divided by pigeonholing society into two classes, the oppressors and the oppressed. They've carefully manufactured gender stereotypes for men and women while simultaneously creating brand new gender constructs. Hypocritically, they have developed racial stereotypes enshrined within critical race theory that are designed to condemn the white race as oppressors, subjugate people of colour, and I hate that term by the way, as oppressed victims, while simultaneously bestowing indigeneity upon box tickers like our dear friend Bruce Pascoe, for the simple fact he subscribes to leftist unrealism. It may seem crazy, but does anybody else feel like we're all living in a Monty Python skit right now? Call me controversial for maintaining a sense of reality, but if I were to follow leftist dogma, pigeonholing myself as nothing more than an oppressed Aboriginal woman, I'd be wallowing in my victimhood, much like someone in the Senate I'm about to come face to face with pretty soon, and rationalising the notion that I'm inferior to my oppressors, therefore sabotaging my own agency. But that has never been and should never have become the Australian way of life. Much of my life's work has been centred around creating understanding between us as human beings, recognising our unique cultural differences and celebrating that which we share as Australians. This was never a difficult feat because I grew up in an Australia that was all about community. We like to distinguish ourselves from the rest of the world because we took pride in our community's way of life. Just the other night, I listened to comedian Shane Jacobson as the Master of Ceremonies for the Northern Territory Cattlemen Association's gala dinner. Guess what? He was hilarious. And why? Because his performance was rich with rambunctious colloquialisms only found in our unique Australian vernacular. Listening to his humour reminded me of why I'm so proud to be an Australian. At one point during the break, between fits of laughter, from the audience, he took a moment to plead with us all to please keep telling jokes. He believed as a society we'd stop telling them. We've put restrictions on our humour. He's right. We've stopped telling jokes, especially those born out of our distinct shared Australian culture. He was passionate about the fact that our sense of humour is like none other in the world because it is unique to us. My father, who has been described as a grumpy old white man on many occasions by both leftists and those close to him alike, vehemently ensured throughout my childhood that I not only take pride in our shared Australian culture, but the unique language we use. The ex-chalky in him never let me get away with using poor grammar, but more importantly, and not without haste, I would be corrected for ever using Americanisms. We're not guys, Dad would interject. That's a bloody Americanism and we're Australian. And boy, did anyone cop it if they ever addressed him as Sir. This brings me to the point of how very grateful I am that the IPA has launched the wonderful centre that will, with all our support, undo the insidious damage of the left, particularly within our education institutions, and fight to instil better understanding for our nation's history in its entirety. Cancel culture's infatuation with individual identity coupled with its war on free thinking and free speech, must be brought to an end. In order for future generations to benefit from common sense, we must arm ourselves with the weapon of truth and stand unified with pride in our shared Australian values and national identity. When we live in reality, when we call out and say, "The Emperor has no clothes," we can begin to solve some of our most challenging problems, and we can begin to lift our marginalised out of the pit of their despair. It's time to reassert the values that all good and decent people have fought the hard, long battle to impose through law. The right to free speech, the eradication of racism and sexism from our public spaces, and all it takes is courage and good sense. I've long fought to maintain our Australian values. I've fought real racism and sexism all my life. I will not surrender my rights as an Australian woman, hard fought and won for me by generations of women and men willing to take huge personal risks. I will not give up fighting for the rights of real equality and personal empowerment of the most marginalised and vulnerable Australians. They have had their legal rights extended to them, mostly by Conservative governments. But they are being denied the right to exercise them by left-wing gatekeepers speaking on behalf of them. My journey as a truth teller has not been without resistance, similar to our esteemed speakers here tonight, but also similar to my fellow speakers. I'm pretty sure the resistance to common sense and national pride only drives them as it does me. To speak louder, work harder, and be the one to rise up against the resistance for the betterment of what is Australia, what defines us and makes us, without a doubt, one of the most diverse and best communities in the world. Please, once again, put your hands together for the IPA and for our remarkable Australians that are presented tonight.